Hello. So it's been a minute. It's been a while. I have not laid down an episode of this podcast in a little bit over a month. And for those of you who've been following along, my apologies. Admittedly, I had some goals in my life that I decided to retrain my full attention on, or a lot more of it. And so decided to let this go. But recently have been taking on kind of a bizarre adventure, which you can read about in my Substack, actually, if you're following that. And it's more important now than ever that I recommit to reading On the Path, an anthology of the Noble Eightfold Path drawn from the Pāli Canon, written by Ṭhānissaro Bhikkhu. Because of this endeavor that I'm doing, kind of keep me kind of grounded in the practice that I chose for myself. So it's good to be back. And I'm just going to go ahead and pick it right on up. And again, I just want to reiterate that I'm really grateful for this book, and that Ṭhānissaro Bhikkhu and the Metaforest Monastery have decided to put this book in the Creative Commons and to license it under a non-commercial 4.0 unported copyright license, so that people like me can do things like this. Read the book with commentary without trying to make any money by doing it, and to get it out there. Get out the oldest that we know of teachings of Gautama Siddhartha, or at least some of the oldest. And so, yeah, I feel much respect, and I bow deeply to you, Ṭhānissaro Bhikkhu, and the Metaforest Monastery for doing this service to humanity. And I'm going to go ahead and pick it up where I left off, which is at the bottom of page 169, and we are still in chapter 3, beginning on our journey of the Eightfold Path and looking at right view. And so we're beginning with a new subsection, from mundane to transcendent right view. And this is from Sutta 70. Then the Blessed One gave a graduated talk to Upali, the householder, i.e. a talk on giving, a talk on virtue, a talk on heaven. He proclaimed the drawbacks, degradation, and defilement in sensuality, and the rewards of renunciation. Then, when he knew that Upali the householder was of ready mind, malleable mind, unhindered mind, exultant mind, confident mind, he proclaimed to him the distinctive teaching of the awakened ones, and awakened ones is capitalized. Stress, origination, cessation, path. So immediately, right? Immediately, right view and right speech at the right time, right? Which we'll get to later. Right speech. Waiting till the mind is malleable. Waiting. The word choices used here. I'm just going to scroll back here. What they're saying to me, exultant. You know, when you hear words like exultant mind, I was actually just kind of adjacently talking about this in the work I'm doing in a Substack with this other piece of literature that I actually don't have much respect for, but I'm actively doing it to challenge my own ego. But I was talking about this a little bit, you know, because this particular practice, they're really into kind of cultivating exultant mind and staying in exultant mind. But as I mentioned in that post, and I'll say again here, you know, Buddhism differs quite a bit from this particular endeavor that I'm doing. And what I'm hearing here is, you know, that the Buddha waited until the practitioner had gotten to experience the fruits of this practice, to see for themselves, you know, especially when you're talking about the jhanic experiences, you know, where as I've mentioned, you know, I've had some pretty incredible experiences, and not always pure a pleasure, by the way. It's weird. I don't know what else to tell you about it. You know, that then it was time to kind of get into the ethical part of Buddhism, which is the backbone of Buddhism, And to get into the ethical path, you really kind of have to get into the weeds of what he's saying is, what the awakened ones realized. Stress, the origins of stress, the cessation of stress, and the path, the path to all of that, the rest of it. Just as a white cloth with stains removed would rightly take dye, in the same way there arose to Pāli the householder in that very seat the dustless, stainless Dhamma I. Whatever is subject to origination is all subject to cessation. Then, having seen the Dhamma, having reached the Dhamma, known the Dhamma, gained a footing in the Dhamma, having crossed over and beyond doubt, having had no more questioning, Pāli, the householder, gained fearlessness and was independent of others with regard to the teacher's message. And that's MN 56. And yeah, that's a really big part of Buddhism, right? That's a really big part of the practice. And I would say that that's certainly been my experience, that when I did see for myself, when I have seen for myself, whatever is subject to origination is also subject to cessation. You can understand that academically, you can understand that theoretically, you can read books about it, you can talk about it in groups. But I think when you have the subjective experience of that being true, well, there's really no going home again. And I've mentioned that before. And this is why, and I've been actually going through this. And it's interesting. Somebody in the Substack, when I mentioned in my Substack this endeavor that I'm getting ready to do, and talking about what I'm going to be doing and explaining it in my last post, a very kind person reached out and made a suggestion, that you might want to do this with a friend, because they didn't say this, but I have to assume that it is kind of radical. If you're familiar with these ideas, if you practice Buddhism and you have some time in, or you've sat in meditation for a long time, if you've played with some of these ideas, then what I'm doing is pretty out there and pretty radical. And I ain't gonna lie, I would love to have, in Buddhism, the supplementary factors. I would love to have an admirable friend on this journey, but I don't have anybody in my life right now who's interested in this stuff, quite frankly. And so I am traveling solo right now, just like I did so many years ago when I discovered this path. And I am also really looking forward to, to finding, and I don't like the word find, admirable friendship will present itself. It always does, in Christianity, right? I believe the saying, he who seeks finds. And yeah, Buddhism kind of sort of believes in the same thing, that, it's more about, well, I don't want to get off track. I have a tendency to do that. But yeah, good stuff here. We're going to move on. And the next little ditty-do that we're going to be getting into here, this subsection is giving. And this is Sutta 71. As he was sitting to one side, King Pasenadi Kosala said to the Blessed One, "Where, Lord, should a gift be given? Wherever the mind feels confidence, great King. But a gift given where, Lord, bears great fruit. This," and then it says in brackets question, "is one thing, great King. Where should a gift be given? While this, a gift given where bears great fruit, is something else entirely. What is given to a virtuous person rather than to an unvirtuous one bears great fruit." And that's SN 3:24. So what is being said here in this exchange between the Buddha and King Pasenadi Kosala? So this idea, where should a gift be given? The Buddha suggests that, if we're going to be gifting, we let our heart be our guide on that decision. Where do we feel inspired? Where does our heart feel inspired? Where do we feel trust? So giving comes from a sincere confidence in whoever or whatever you're giving your gift to. So to my view, that means that it's done with intentionality, with discernment, like everything in Buddhism. When I think about, where do my gifts go? And I'm also thinking about, when do I cut off my gifts? When do I stop providing gifts or support? Because really, both of these decisions in a lay practitioner's life are coming from the same sutta kind of sentiment here. We give when it feels true, when we have faith, through our own discernment, through our own lens, vis-a-vis practice, ethical practice. Can we get behind this? Do we have faith in this? Do we have confidence in this? And if we're losing confidence in this, and this is my interpretation here, right? So this is, again, I read you the passage, and then I that's the end, SN 3:24. To my view, how I take this is, and this is also the same barometer that I use when I pull back my support. So pulling back support is not coming from a place of hatred. It's not coming from a place of opposition, right? Clinging or aversion. It's not coming from a place of aversion. Although, when I'm not at my best self, it absolutely does. When I feel profoundly triggered and I haven't attended to myself, and I can slip into some conditioned patterning. Yeah, that's how humans behave, but if we can nip it in the bud, as I like to say to people that I work with, and when you practice daily, it's easier to do that, then you can become more discerning. And it also requires, that it's not one and done, that you spend time regularly contemplating about where your gifts are going and how they're being used and whether or not they still resonate. So that's kind of how I take that. And I'll go ahead and move on. And so this is Sutta 72. Vaka. Whoever prevents another from giving a gift creates 3 obstructions, 3 impediments. Which 3? He creates an obstruction to the merit of the giver, an obstruction to the recipient's gains, and prior to that, he undermines and damages his own self. Whoever prevents another from giving a gift creates these 3 obstructions, these 3 impediments. I tell you, Vaka, even if a person throws the rinsings of a bowl or a cup into a village pool or pond thinking, may whatever animals live here feed on this, that would be a source of merit, to say nothing of what is given to human beings. But I do say that what is given to a virtuous person is of great fruit, and not so much what is given to an unvirtuous person. And that's AN 3:58. I think we're kind of getting into, and again, I am not a scholar. Oh gosh, not even close. So I always have to begin with I think. Okay. I think what I'm understanding here is this has a lot to do with dana in Buddhism. And it also has, I'm guessing here, a lot to do with the monastic life. That monastics in Buddhism, they survive really vis-a-vis the gifts of their community members. So they go out into the streets with their empty bowl, and they walk, sometimes depending on where they live, and maybe the season and how many people are in the area at the time, depending on the stress level of the community in which they are practicing the monastic life. They're relying exclusively on the good, well wishes and gifts of their community members. And so here Buddha is saying it is extremely not only unskillful, but harmful to prevent someone from giving. And he outlines these 3 reasons. First of all, In Buddhism, the person who gives is accumulating merit. And hopefully that's not the only reason why one gives. Hopefully if you're practicing, you're actually giving because you genuinely want to give. But, a lot of people in communities, they don't practice, right? But what they can do is they can give. So they give. And they fill the monastic's bowl. And, if you read up about, kind of early Buddhist monastics and ascetics too, and especially speaking with Buddhism here, and again, I'm not a scholar, but my understanding with Buddhism, is because you're relying solely on the generosity of others, you may not be eating much, so the giver is they're improving their karma by giving. It's merit. They're accumulating merit. They're also blocking what could have been gained. Sustenance in the case of a monastic. But Buddha also suggests that what's even more damaging than either of these things is how much you damage yourself through a tightening, a miserliness, a tightening, obstructing goodness, preventing others from giving, obstructing it. In Buddhism is a defilement. Wow, right? So why would anybody want to block someone else from giving? Well, I can think of a lot of reasons, I think about people that have been in my family of origin, or just people that I've come across in my life, encountered in my life, who've come from any sort of extreme traumatic background. Oftentimes, it could be a war-torn region where they were really just trying to survive. Food, just getting access to food, was a matter of whether or not they would eat that day, whether or not they would go hungry, whether or not their baby would go hungry. This is a deep, deep well here, right? So anyway, as I usually do, I digress, but the Buddha warns, you're really damaging yourself through your own greed, need to control, or maybe even jealousy. Why are you giving it over there? Give it to me. Or maybe because you disagree. Maybe you're attached. All kinds of reasons, right, why we might get in the way. But again, if it's coming through the view of Buddhist ethics, then obviously it goes without saying that the giver has already practiced discernment, right? That it's already a gift going to a worthy... Worthy simply meaning, again, going back and rereading or re-listening to what I just said. So yeah, I always have a tendency to just go on and on about these short little sections, but there you go. So that's kind of how I take that. And we'll keep it moving. Sutta 73. A diva. Giving is good, dear sir, even when there's next to nothing. Giving is good. Giving with conviction is good. The giving of what's righteously gained is good. And further, giving with discretion is good. It's praised by the one well gone. And one well is capitalized. What's given to them bears great fruit, like seeds sown in a good field. And that comes from SN 1:33. And so again, I won't reiterate what I already said. I think this is just, again, as Ṭhānissaro Bhikkhu, and many things I appreciate about this book is that he's taking key concepts in each of these, right? And right now we're in right view, and he's pulling from the suttas that support the concept. And so again, right now we're looking at the idea of giving in Buddhism, in early Buddhism. Okay, so I'll just kind of keep on moving. Now getting into Sutta 74. One who is generous, a master of giving, is dear and charming to people at large. This is a fruit of generosity, visible in the here and now. And further, good people, people of integrity, admire one who is generous, a master of giving. This too is a fruit of generosity, visible in the here and now. And further, the fine reputation of one who is generous, a master of giving, is spread far and wide. This too is a fruit of generosity, visible in the here and now. And further, when one who is generous, a master of giving, approaches any assembly of people, noble warriors, Brahmins, householders, or contemplatives, he or she does so confidently and without embarrassment. This too is a fruit of generosity, visible in the here and now. And further, at the breakup of the body, after death, one who is generous, a master of giving, reappears in a good destination, a heavenly world. This is a fruit of generosity in the next life. And that comes from AN 5:35. So here, the Buddha is talking to the community, right? The Buddha is talking to leaders. The Buddha is talking to people who are interested in leadership roles, whether that be, small L or, big L, kings. So he's giving this kind of a really practical reason, why it might be advisable to take an active role in giving. Reason number one, people will like you more. They'll respect you more. They'll admire you more. Generosity, generosity of spirit as well. This is an area where, I can struggle, when I feel in danger, or when I feel like my values, something feels off. Not necessarily that what I'm experiencing isn't necessarily, devious in any way, but my nervous system, something is off with me. If you've listened to this podcast before, I've talked about this before. When I'm triggered, from my view, and I would say from a Buddhist view, really, it's really my job, to kind of look at that and kind of go, oh, what's going on there? My childhood, which I talk about quite a bit in this podcast, has played its own role in my fabricated state. And one of the ways that can manifest when I feel either emotionally or physically in danger, oh yeah, I can really see my Shempa. I can really see the weak areas of my practice where how I know that I'm not awake. Generosity, that kind of openness, that lack of selfishness. When we're in that space, and I realize that when you come from trauma, that doesn't feel accessible. Why? Because when you tried to be like that as a kid, I think that, we come into the world that way. But if openness, right? If openness was dangerous, and that became a patterning, right? Openness equals danger. I am open, I'm vulnerable, I'm punished. I'm open, I'm vulnerable, I'm punished. I'm open, I'm vulnerable, I'm punished. Right? So now we get into fabrication in Buddhism, right? And yes, this can absolutely happen at scale. Yes, this is both on the meta and on the macro. This can happen at scale, and it does happen at scale. But what Buddha's coming back to is he's just saying it how it is, right? That it's true, right? I mean, I think that we ourselves can acknowledge, I myself can acknowledge, when I am in the presence of someone who exudes selflessness, who exudes openness, I can feel it. I can feel my guard dropping, right? And so we can cultivate this. And if it doesn't come easy to us, that's all right. We don't need to beat ourselves up for it. Remember fabrication. This is the life that we have. This is what we have to work with. Right? But he's just giving these practical reasons, right? And so if we notice maybe that it's not easy for us to give, it's not giving to others or even giving to ourselves, or both does not come easily to us, well, then it's worth exploring. And if you don't practice Buddhism, then how is giving discussed in your traditional practice? I would challenge you, and maybe explore in whatever your traditional practice is. Why? What is your relationship to giving? Giving to others, giving to yourself. So yeah, people dig it, people admire it, people respect it. You get a good reputation, and that's pretty cool. And when leaders don't do that, well, I think we all know what happens when leaders don't do that. Yeah. So I'm going to keep on reading. Sutta 75. What the miser fears that keeps him from giving is the very danger that comes when he doesn't give. And that's SN 1:32. So what is the Buddha saying here? What the miser fears, that thing that the miser fears that keeps the miser from giving, from generosity, is the thing that he or she needs to be careful about. Oftentimes when we are lacking in generosity, it's because we're afraid. As I just mentioned, maybe you came from a war-torn region. I grew up for the first many years of my life very, very abjectly, really poor. I'm homeless for a year or two, squatting in somebody else's house. And, experiencing, legitimate hunger, yeah, things like that. And there are people that live all over the world like that, correct? So when that is your fabricated state, when that is the conditioning, right, it makes sense to want to hang on to every scrap, every fucking scrap you get. Fear, lack, insecurity, because it was insecure, because life is insecure. Life is suffering. Not, again, go back, and that has an absurd meaning now in the West, but please go and find out what the Buddha actually meant by that. But what he's saying in this short sutta here is so powerful. He's saying, but by refusing to give, when we come from that place and thereby we don't give because we're afraid of the lack of control, we're afraid of the poverty, we're afraid of not having enough, we'll never have enough again, insecurity, food insecurity, fiscal insecurity. This is not your fault. These are the conditions for many via which perhaps you have or are actively living a life. But it's a negative feedback loop. It creates social isolation, lack of support, the natural things that can come to our wealth. It can get stolen. We can lose it in the stock market, right? We can lose it to AI, right? Or in Buddhism, the more cosmological aspects of Buddhism, it seriously impedes your karma, your kama, your merit for future well-being. So some of us perhaps are naturally generous. It's easy. Some have to cultivate it. But either way, we can cultivate it. And there's a lot to be said for that. And I think it's a great endeavor. It's one that I have to work on a lot myself. I sometimes have to actively remind myself to be, I'm very, very generous fiscally, but generous with my attention, particularly when I feel emotionally threatened, right? And I exhibit these things that the Buddha warns about: isolating myself, becoming miserly with my attention to protect myself, right? So this can become very, very nuanced, right? This is Buddhist psychology here that we're talking about. And so, we can practice kind of working against that massaged, potentially, negative relationship to wealth. And what I mean by wealth is not necessarily monetary wealth, right? We're talking about good wishes, goodwill, our time, our presence, our energy, our love, our warmth, our compassion. That's what I mean. That's Buddha. That's Buddhist wealth. And, maybe that peach that you have in your fruit bin that's going to spoil in a day in your community if a monastic wanders by with a begging bowl, right? So that sort of thing. All right, so I'm gonna keep on moving. So this is Sutta 76. No misers go to the world of the devas. Those who don't praise giving are fools. The enlightened express their approval for giving and so find ease in the world beyond. And again, this is from DHP 177. And again, I don't think there's really anything else I need to say. I think it's just kind of more of the same idea, that, giving for the reasons that the Buddha suggested. There's practical reasons. And then I'll just say, speaking for myself, nothing gives me greater pleasure than giving. I taught for such a long time, consider it right livelihood. I don't know how I feel about it today. It depends. I don't know. but why do I love teaching? In many ways, my relationship to teaching was very much a selfless act, too much so, in the sense that I didn't establish good boundaries for myself. And so, I changed my relationship to teaching. I had a huge part to play in that myself. But so much of my relationship to teaching was, what I think the pleasure that comes from generosity can do for us. I think about, the ways many dollars I spent, just buying, supplies. And, I had a student once who, I taught college, and I've had many students who were homeless. I was homeless when I was in college for a good year. And fortunately, I had a lovely family member who put me up, even though she was going through hard times. And thanks to her, I was able to stay in college. Giving, look at that. She gave to me, and she made my future possible. There's another great reason to give, right? There's another great reason to give. So many good reasons to give. So I'm going to keep on going. Sutta 77. If beings knew, as I know, the results of giving and sharing, they would not eat without having given, nor would the stain of stinginess overcome their minds. Even if it were their last bite, their last mouthful, they would not eat without having shared, if there were someone to receive their gift. But because kings do not know, as I know, the results of giving and sharing, they eat without having given. The stain of stinginess overcomes their minds. Ho ho! And that's from ITI 26. Itivutaka. Oh, that was a good one, eh? Oh, wow. And so I love this about Buddhism, he's, to my understanding, the Buddha did not hold kings in particularly high or low regard. He didn't think they were superior. Hierarchically speaking, he didn't really buy into any of that nonsense. In fact, this is a cautionary tale. He says that the role they're in makes them particularly susceptible to being a jackass. And he's saying it right here. He actually says it quite frequently. He doesn't lick anybody's heel. He practices discernment. He's saying, hey, you might be powerful, but you don't escape karma. You're not exempt from dying. Someday you're going to die. You ready? He says, hey, you might be feared, so he reminds them, check yourself before you wreck yourself. Mind the limits of worldly power. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Don't forget yourself. Don't forget yourself. Be just. Be ethical. Only the Dhamma protects us. not our money, not our prestige, not even the community who loves us and admires us because of our generosity. That too is impermanent. Protects us. So it's a warning, you know. I'm going to read another one here, see how we go. This is Sutta 78, Adavata. When a house is on fire, the vessel salvaged is the one that will be of use, not the one left there to burn. So when the world is on fire, with aging and death, one should salvage one's wealth by giving. What's given is well salvaged. What's given bears fruit as pleasure. What isn't given does not. Thieves take it away, or kings. It gets burnt by fire or lost. Then, in the end, one leaves the body together with one's possessions. Knowing this, the intelligent man enjoys possessions and gives. Having enjoyed and given, in line with his means, uncensured, he goes to the heavenly state. And that's from SN 1:41. Good stuff. Good stuff. I'm trying to see how long this section is. I really wanted to just kind of get all the way through giving. Oh, wait, I might be able to do it. Oh, I think I can. Sutta 79. On that occasion, Princess Sumana, with an entourage of 500 ladies in waiting, riding on 500 carriages, went to the Buddha. On arrival, having bowed down to him, she sat to one side. As she was sitting there, she said to the Blessed One, "Suppose there were two disciples of the Blessed One, equal in conviction, equal in virtue, equal in discernment. But one was a giver of alms, the other a non-giver of alms. At the break of the body, after death, they would reappear in a good destination, a heavenly world. Having become divas, would there be any distinction, any difference between the two?" That's a pretty cool question, right? And I would imagine that the Buddha had to, field all kinds of questions like this. And he did, which I think is really, really cool. "There would be, Sumana," said the Blessed One. "The one who was a giver of alms on becoming a diva would surpass the non-giver of alms in 5 areas: in divine lifespan, divine beauty, divine pleasure, divine status, and divine sovereignty. The one who was a giver of alms on becoming a diva would surpass the non-giver of alms in these 5 areas. And if they were to fall from there and reappear in this world, having become human beings, would there be any distinction, any difference between the two?" "There would, Sumana," said the Blessed One. "The one who was a giver of alms on becoming a human being would surpass the non-giver of alms in 5 areas: in human lifespan, human beauty, human pleasure, human status, and human sovereignty. The one who was a giver of alms on becoming a human being would surpass the non-giver of alms in these 5 areas. And if they were to go forth from home into the homeless life of a monk, having gone forth, would there be any distinction, any difference between the two?" "There would be, Sumana," said the Blessed One. "The one who was a giver of alms on going forth would surpass the non-giver of alms in 5 areas. He would often be asked to take food, to make use of shelter, to make use of medicine, and rarely not be asked. He would live with companions in the holy life who would often treat him with pleasing actions and rarely with unpleasing ones, who would treat him with pleasing words, pleasing thoughts, who would present him with pleasing gifts and rarely with unpleasing ones. The one who was a giver of alms on going forth would surpass the non-giver of alms in these 5 areas. And if both were to attain arahantship, would there be any distinction, any difference between their attainments of arahantship? In that case, I tell you, Sumana, there would be no difference between them as to their release." It's amazing, Lord, and astounding. Just this is reason enough to give alms, to make merit, and that merit is helpful to one who has become a diva. Merit is helpful to one who has become a human being. And merit is helpful to one who has gone forth. And that comes from AN 5:31. And so again, I think the Buddha is, reiterating, that even on a certain level, there's no difference. That too, that level, that condition is karmic seeds ripening. It's all cause and effect. So regardless, in answer to the question, this fascinating question, this probing question, which is so great, I love it. Oh, I would have given anything to be able to ask questions like this of someone whose roadmap I have found to be so effective for myself. I love that he says, look, on a certain level, no, but yeah, because it's karmic seeds ripening. It isn't just about charity for charity's sake. It's foundational karma. It's merit, right? It's merit. It's how we have that small part to play in our, if you're going in for the cosmological aspects of Buddhism, right? And for those of you who follow my podcast, you know that I'm, I don't know what I am. I secular. I don't like that word anymore either. I'm curious. I reserve the right to know when I don't know something, but Buddhism, is a religion with a cosmology, a very cosmological aspect, and karma is the key. And so here he's saying, and so we do it to water our own merit to improve future karmic seeds. I know it's not very sexy or romantic, but remember who he's talking to, okay? And practical questions deserve practical answers. So Sutta 80. And how is a donation endowed with 6 factors? There is the case where there are 3 factors of the donor, the 3 factors of the recipients. And which are the 3 factors of the donor? Let me read that again. That came out weird. And how is a donation endowed with 6 factors? There is the case where there are the 3 factors of the donor, the 3 factors of the recipients. And which are the 3 factors of the donor? There is the case where the donor, before giving, is glad. While giving, his or her mind is bright and clear. And after giving, is gratified. These are the 3 factors of the donor. And which are the 3 factors of the recipients? There is the case where the recipients are free of passion or are practicing for the subduing of passion, free of aversion or practicing for the subduing of aversion, and free of delusion or practicing for the subduing of delusion. These are the 3 factors of the recipients. Just as it's not easy to take the measure of the great ocean as just this many buckets of water, just this many hundreds of buckets of water, just this many thousands of buckets of water, or just this many hundreds of thousands of buckets of water, it's simply reckoned as a great mass of water, incalculable, immeasurable. In the same way, it's not easy to take the measure of the merit of a donation that's endowed with 6 factors as just this much, a bonanza of merit, a bonanza of what is skillful, a nutriment of bliss, heavenly, resulting in bliss, leading to heaven, that leads to what is desirable, pleasing, charming, beneficial, pleasant. It is simply reckoned as a great mass of merit, incalculable, immeasurable. And this is AN 6:37. And I love that Ṭhānissaro Bhikkhu leaves it here. This is why I want to keep reading, because the next section, we're now done with giving. And the suttas that Ṭhānissaro Bhikkhu pulled from for giving as it pertains to right view. And the next section is virtue. And I love that he ended with this particular sutta. He kind of goes on and on. Once again, with these kind of practical kinds of reasons why, the giver, we, again, remember Buddhism is practice. So perhaps you can cultivate these things, right? Cultivate generosity of spirit. I'm really looking forward to giving this. I'm really looking forward to being of service in this way. I can't wait. But again, not going over the top with it, right? So again, he's kind of describing all of this. But then at the end of the sutta, what does he say? It is simply reckoned as a great mass of merit, incalculable, immeasurable. I think when you really start to practice and you really start to see for yourself the way Buddha recommended that we all do, then this really is the only proper way to describe the joys of giving that supersede, well, I'm going to use the word supersede because I'm an arrogant bastard, that kind of, move beyond just kind of these social, practical reasons why giving might be a good idea. From a, social, I don't know, social resources or, so kind of, how you're seen, right? How you're perceived in the fabricated world, but then remember, this all began with kind of understanding the audience when the mind was malleable and all that, right? Well, unless you're contemplative or you're actually in training as an arahat or, what have you, you may not experience in the way that your heart breaks kind of way this last section of this, right? But that it is inconceivable and it is, it is immeasurable, the feeling of it in the body. But that language may not be the most effective method of training and giving when working with leaders. And so that's kind of how I make of all of this. These suttas that Ṭhānissaro Bhikkhu pulled on the role of giving in Buddhism in relationship to right view. And it's good to be back. I really enjoyed this. And if you're listening, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. And take good care of yourself. And I'm back. I'll be doing this once a week. No longer recording these live, but recording them and dropping them in my Discord. And take good care.